We're live all across social media for another episode of Your Scary Stories. We've got people filing in.
Nice.
Somebody said Luke is their favorite. Is he walking his cat again tonight?
It was a dog. I walked the cat.
We are going to be taking turns sharing stories tonight. Scary stories, of course. Last week we kind of did like this format where we had one long story and we all took turns, different parts of reading it. Tonight we're going to return back to the normal format of just each sharing a story. So yeah, if there's something you prefer, if you like one more than the other, just let us know. And of course, wherever you're listening or watching, make sure you're commenting along on that platform and we'll interact with you in between our things or, whenever we can. So we definitely want to make sure that we reward those who are watching live. We had, quite a bit of people. I think Twitter is the most, but that's just where I personally have the biggest following. But nevertheless, we are live everywhere. So if you're joining us, comment along. Wow. So where do I go with this, guys? We just worked on the website this week. We're getting up and going.
We got our past episodes, I believe, on there, and there's some links on there for different ways to contact us and get in touch with us as well,
including our Reddit and our Discord.
We're up everywhere, guys. Look for Your Scary Stories. I think I'm going to kick it off. I think that was the plan, right? I'm going to kick it off.
Sounds good. Yep.
All right. Fear Thy Roommate Scary Story. In June of 2019, an ad was posted on Craigslist for a room available for rent in a single-family home in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. The ad wasn't for a whole house rental. Rather, the man who posted the ad was looking to be roommates with somebody, meaning they would share the living space, including the kitchen. That is what the ad said. It said in further details, 35-year-old male looking to rent out one of my empty bedrooms in my 4-bedroom, 1-family house. It's just me living here currently. The other 2 rooms are currently being used as storage, but depending on how much space you need, I could consider allowing you to use 1 extra spare room with storage. The ad then goes on to list all the features inside the house, including maintenance. It even goes on to note in all capitals that no pets or no smokers were allowed, which could lead some to believe the person behind the listing is a clean person. Halfway trusting person, possibly. Definitely a plus if you don't have either one of those. A few days after this ad was posted, a regular 25-year-old named James came across the listing, desperate for a place of his own and to move out of his parents' house. For $900 a month, he thought it could be a good deal, depending on the homeowner, of course. James contacted the owner through the number provided on the ad, and they had a 5-minute phone call and set up a time and date for James to view the house. On a Tuesday after work, James stopped by the house, which was exactly how it looked in all the photos. The owner was waiting on the front porch. He introduced himself as Todd. He had to be at least 35 years old. Anyways, Todd gave James a walk around the house like you would if you were viewing any apartment or house for the first time. The house was a modest size, nothing fancy or anything like that, but clean, and for the price was very spacious. James noted that there were no wood floors, there was all carpet, even the living room and bedrooms. After the showing, Todd discussed with James the ground rules, which were mostly normal, most of them. The one that stood out to James was the rule of having a sleep time by 12 o'clock, midnight, during the week. Since James works full time, he didn't see this as much of an inconvenience, just rather unusual rule to have for grown adults having a roommate. But he chalked it up to Todd also working 9 to 5 and not wanting to be woken up by noises late at night. A week later, James moved in, which, given that the bedroom was already furnished, it was an easy, quick process. Todd would be in the living room most of the time watching TV, or he was in the living room most of the time watching TV or just reading the paper. He didn't go out much. He would try to talk to James anytime he was in the kitchen making food, which, to be honest, got a little bit old pretty fast. According to James, he says he wanted to be left alone and just wanted to eat in peace, but never had the luxury of doing that. One work night, James woke up thirsty, so he went to fill up a cup of water down in the kitchen. Once in the kitchen, he noticed red stains on the carpet leading to the basement. The basement door was in the kitchen, pretty common. He quietly opened the basement door and found the red stains led down the carpeted stairs. Todd's voice came from behind him in the kitchen, which was lit up by a small nightlight. He saw Todd was sitting on one of the kitchen chairs, and he said in a raspy voice, "Don't go down there." Todd said the stains on the carpet were wine stains. James didn't ask any questions. He just filled up his cup with water and went back upstairs. From this moment onward, James wasn't 100% comfortable in the house and was now suspicious of his landlord/roommate's behavior. One day after work, Todd wasn't home, so James decided to take a look in his bedroom being Todd's bedroom, his landlord's. The door was locked, but it was easily unlockable with his fingernail, so that's what he did, entering the room. Once inside, James immediately found 2 of his shirts, and strangely, his Under Armour water bottle, and a basket of clothes. James took his 3 belongings and left the room. When he left the room, he locked the door back with his fingernail. He planned on taking a personal day from work and evacuating the place early the next day without mentioning anything to Todd. After all, there was no lease or security deposit, so he could leave pretty easily. He did some packing that night, and he had a hard time sleeping because his mind was racing. At some point while he was lying there awake trying to sleep, his door creaked open. It was past midnight when this happened. Since he was lying on his back, he simply opened his eyes to see Todd standing in the doorway. The dim light from the hallway nightlight was illuminating his face and body in an unsettling way. Possibly not even aware that James was awake or not. James wasn't sure if Todd was aware, but Todd stepped into the room slightly and said, "I know you went to my room. I told you, my room is off limits. From now on. Also, I don't want you going into the basement. If this happens again, there's going to be a big problem." He then got angry and slammed the door, and James heard him stomping back down the hallway to his room. He then slammed the door as well to his room once he got in there. James said that Todd sounded drunk, and he was saying this because he was slurring his words and his voice was raspier than usual. James started packing up the rest of his things first thing the next morning. He blocked Todd's phone number and temporarily moved back into his parents' house. A couple of days later, he received a voicemail from some random number that sounded all garbled. Just a lot of breathing and weird mouth sounds on the other side of the phone. James said he's confident that the stains on the carpet weren't wine. They looked more like blood stains. Whether this Todd guy was hiding something or not will remain a mystery.
Yeah, I think it was a good move to get out of there.
Run, son, run! That sounds like a really real story.
Well, you've kind of, you've dealt with you throughout life. You deal with like really confrontational people, so you can kind of get that feeling, what's going on with this guy? Stepping in your room and just kind of shouting or whatever, saying, don't go in my room. That is just...
It's weird, but I think the creepy part is he went in his room and he found some of his stuff.
Yeah, like why does he have my stuff in here?
Like your water bottle and some of your shirts. So obviously he's going through your room.
Yeah.
He keeps basically threatening you not to go in his room. Then he adds the basement to it after he sees these red wine stains, according to the landlord roommate.
I think the part of that story that makes it seem so real is the opening the door lock with the fingernail.
Oh yeah,
my door lock does that. Like I can open it up with my fingernail from the outside on my bedroom door. So like I don't have a key to it, but we lock it. Anyone could just go up to it, click it with your fingernail, and turn it.
Over the internet, you see so many Craigslist stuff over the years. Obviously, Craigslist isn't relevant really anymore. But so many horror stories come from Craigslist, and this is another one. You want to move out. This guy wants to move out of his parents' house. He sees this ad online, right? He's like, hey, this is the perfect opportunity. It's cheap. The house is nice. There were some weird rules, though, right? Like bedtimes and stuff, which isn't really typical. But yeah, I guess if you want to get out of your parents' house, it's bad enough. You're going to go along with it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess if you grew up with certain types of parents, you might be like, well, yeah, okay, this is normal, I guess. You got to have like a really strict structure in a household or something. And also, Craigslist is just one of those things where there was just so much, anonymous, there's so anonymity involved with it. So
yeah, there wasn't like any vetting really that went into posting any or doing anything on the platform.
Yeah, and it involved a lot of meeting up in person too. So yeah, there were a lot of stories involving Craigslist. It was a little suspicious.
Put yourself in the shoes of this person, Jack. How would you be feeling?
Well, I would probably also want to leave right away if I saw my stuff in there.
You know what I think you would probably do?
I should have expected some kind of setup here.
Wow. I mean, that would be my reaction. I mean, especially after.
If he took my water bottle, yeah, for sure.
I don't think I'd take that back. Honestly, I don't want the water bottle anymore. Just to be completely honest. Oh, that was a good story. Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Look, believable story.
Definitely a very believable story.
Well, I think we have Luke up next.
This is actually kind of exciting because it's one of two stories by the same user that I got for this. So later we'll hear another one I'm kind of excited about too. And so it starts off. I work at a county jail. One night I was working in the maximum security unit on the night shift. It was pretty boring with nothing really to do except the checks where I go around and look in each cell every 30 minutes or so to make sure everything was okay. The inmates weren't doing anything they weren't supposed to. It had been about 15 minutes or so since I last checked. I was sitting in the control room reading a book to pass the time. The control room sits higher than floor level and looks out over the cell block. If a person of average height were to walk right by you, you'd only see the top of their head. As I'm reading my book, I see out of my peripheral, top of a bald head walk past the window. I knew that nobody else was in the area, as another officer would have to go through two sets of remote-controlled doors. There's no way past my control room. I looked up and into the cell block. I didn't see anyone. I then looked at the camera monitors, which showed every angle of the cell block. Still nothing. I put my book down and exited the control room, making sure to lock the door behind me in case an inmate got out of their cell. They couldn't lock me out of the control room. It's uncommon, but it is possible. I walked into the cell block, shining my flashlight in some of the more dimly lit areas. I took notice that I did not hear a cell door close, so if an inmate did get out of the cell, they would have either had to close their cell door incredibly quietly, or they were hiding somewhere. I radioed for another officer to respond to my location as backup. I began to conduct a check, make sure to count the inmates in each cell, and pull on the door to make sure it was locked. When I reached the upper tier, one of the inmates was standing at the cell window and asked me what time it was. I told him he noticed I was early on my check. He noticed I had been checking the doors. These guys have nothing to do but to watch you do this, so the inmate asked if I saw the bald-headed guy. He must have seen the expression on my face because he said he was seen by somebody at least once a night, usually passing quickly by the cell windows. So they always knew it was him because there was no bald officers on the night shift. I went back to the control room and locked it behind me. I asked the officer who responded as my backup about the bald-headed guy. He was a very senior officer and said that he had never personally seen him, but it wasn't uncommon for people to report it. I never saw the bald-headed guy again. Eventually I was promoted, and every once in a while, an officer or inmate will ask me about him.
Prisons are scary, man.
Yeah, they're scary without ghosts.
They're scary without ghosts and other paranormal things. You throw that in, that's just terrifying.
Yeah, there's something about like certain places you just immediately have something scary about it.
Yeah,
hospitals for me, and prisons,
nurseries, everything for you. But
wait, that's true.
Going back to the story, and obviously I'm multitasking with people on social media, but you got to assume that it's an inmate at first, right? Like he said he did.
Yeah, and that would be a terrifying thing because he's in the maximum security unit. Yeah, these are dangerous people, and he wouldn't want to deal with that on a midnight shift or something. So that alone is scary.
Well, it does make you think that it's possible that it was an inmate because the inmate was the one that was saying, "Hey, did you see that? Did you see the bald-headed man?" There, it does make it seem like they're setting up something, or I don't know. Either way, it would be a bit too much.
Think the inmate's messing with him, or?
See, I don't know because the other officer said that they had heard about this before.
And we find out later that it's an inmate escape from a maximum security. Yeah. So I guess he wouldn't have known the bald thing. Obviously, I mean, interesting, scary story. So what made you, like you said, this is a story I want to share today. Like there had to be something that drew you towards it.
Well, it was mostly the prison thing. I saw, I read this story, and then I found out he had another one. And it was like two ghost stories from a prison from the same guy. I wanted to do them both because I thought this is great. Prison, like you say, prisons in general are just terrifying. And so I don't know, something odd. It's not like a jump scare kind of monster story. It's just like something slightly off about already a tense situation that makes the whole thing just feel creepy and kind of terrifying to me. I don't know
where he was located at all here. I'm sure he just kept it anonymous.
He did keep that anonymous. He didn't list anyone's names, just in case, you don't want people's information getting out. So he didn't say where he was from.
Sure called out us bald people going bald, though, didn't he? Man.
My forehead goes all the way back.
All the way back. Just keeps going back.
Well,
wow.
Delicious orange juice you got there?
Yeah, it's orange juice. Just for the AI out there on social media trying to get me for doing something on a live, it is orange juice. So everybody knows. That's the truth. So do I have the next story?
Yes, you do.
I have the next story. Okay, yeah, because Jack didn't do much this week. That's fine. No, I'm just kidding. Let's cue the music back up and do this. This is called Hacker. I'm 24 years old and I'm from a small town in Nova Scotia, Canada. I keep my social circle very small, just a few friends and my coworkers. Really, I mention that as a point in saying that I don't really know anyone who would be out to get me in any way. I browse Reddit a lot in my free time and I'm an active poster. There was this one night when I pulled up Reddit on my browser out of boredom and I had a new message, which was not unusual because I'd had people message me in reference to my posts quite often. It was a message request from some random account, and oddly enough, it was a now deleted username. The message said, check your email, make sure you check your spam folder. I replied back, huh? Why? Who is this? In the meantime, I opened my Gmail and went to my spam folder. There was one email that stuck out from the rest, titled in all caps, I know who you are. I opened the email and it was basically a paragraph full of all my personal information, including my full name, my Reddit password, my home address, along with other threats. Basically, whoever sent this email was asking for a one-time payment of $5,000 through Bitcoin to a specific Bitcoin wallet address. My heart was in my throat at this point in time. I had a terrible feeling of helplessness, and like the entire world was collapsing in on me. The first thing I did was cover my webcam with a piece of tape. Secondly, I went back to Reddit to see if the user had ever answered my message, and they hadn't. I went to report the account on Reddit as quickly as I could, as if that would even do anything. I replied to the email, copying and pasting the exact same message I'd sent the person in Reddit on my Reddit account, asking who is this, how they got my information, and if this was a prank. I got an email back around 5 minutes later and in all caps saying, no, it's not a prank. We have all your information, including where you live, so your best course of action is to do exactly what we say, and you'll never hear from us again. Obviously, I was not going to shell out $5,000. I don't even make a lot of money to begin with. I contacted all my friends asking them if it was any of them, begging them just to come forward before I call the police. None of them admitted to it, so given that I threatened to call the police, I knew it was none of them. I tried to think of anyone at work who might have an issue with me, but I get along with everyone at work. I chalked it up to my password somehow being stolen by a malware or a hacker. And through that, they somehow got the rest of my information. The main question was, do I pay the money? And that was absolutely not going to happen. I forced myself to go to sleep and left my laptop off the whole next day. I used my desktop instead. After getting home from work, I didn't sign into Reddit or anything, though I did, however, change my password on all the other websites and apps. I finally signed into my laptop late that night because I was just so bored and curious. Curious, but nervous to see if anything had changed and if I had got any new emails. I signed on and everything on my computer still looked normal. So I went to Reddit and I saw the user who messaged me was now deleted, and then went to a subreddit which talked about computer hackers and scams and such, and I posted my experience. At some point, I noticed the taskbar at the bottom of my screen turned darker. Curious, I minimized all windows, and my desktop wallpaper was different. I knew right away what it was because I recognized the outside of my bedroom window. showing the white frame of outside my window, and in the picture there was a flash of the camera. And inside that, it also caught me laying in my bed sleeping. Some seconds later, a pop-up window appeared, along with the normal Windows error beep sound that comes up when this happens. The message read, "Hey," with a winky face emoji with it. I closed my laptop screen and forced the computer off by holding down the power button. I also pulled my blinds down and called my parents. I told my dad over the phone that some hacker got all my information, and he came over right away with his truck to help me load any valuables I could think of into his truck to stay with them for a while. Before we drove off from my apartment, my dad yelled out like a madman into the night sky, basically threatening whoever was hacking me. It was definitely a scene, but I was too preoccupied with worry to be embarrassed by it. I stayed with my parents for a few weeks and used my mom's computer when needed. I blocked that email address that sent me the original email. I finally got back to my apartment a few days ago. I'm still very scared to hear a knock at my window or get another threatening email. I haven't brought it to the police yet, as I'm hoping all of this was just a bluff to try to get me to pay.
Yeah, so that's rough. You definitely want to take cybersecurity very seriously because, like, there's just a lot of crazy people out there.
I was actually watching a video today on how easy it is to get everybody's information. This guy showed how you just go to like a coffee shop, set up like $100 piece of equipment, and every person who logs in onto the Wi-Fi there, you get their passwords, you get their emails, and then from there you can escalate and grab more stuff, like getting a secure shell onto their computer and start messing with stuff like changing the wallpaper. Totally doable with a little tiny bit of training that you can find completely free on the internet.
Yeah, but they went to his house.
Yeah, that's a bit much, but
That's a whole other level of,
Yeah, and like another thing about like that kind of stuff is you definitely do want to go to the police about that, and there's really not a whole lot you can do by yourself, in that situation, and it's definitely a good idea to get out of that area because if they're taking pictures of you.
laying in your bed sleeping. That
Through the window. That's just,
Can you imagine seeing that? Like, you just open up your wallpaper on your desktop is you in your bed sleeping.
clearly it's someone who knew where he lived, and
I would say, in addition to like going to the police, I would say definitely like, there's really no reason to pay these people because they're crazy. They're doing crazy things, and you're not going to get any kind of peace from that.
You think it was someone he knew, possibly?
That could be.
I think so.
It's me, Austin! Oh, son of a bitch! What? It's me, Austin! It was me all along, Austin!
Think it's possible something like that happened?
So I actually said, son of a bitch.
I do wonder. I mean, it's possible. Like what he doesn't say though is if he has like a computer savvy friend, right? Like that'd be the first person you'd think of.
Yeah.
But how far do you take it? I don't know. I think the Bitcoin thing for me almost makes it seem more legitimate because you do see so many of these Bitcoin scams happening.
Yeah, I know. It's such an easy way to hide transactions of money. There's a thing called like a crypto funnel or crypto vortex, and you put Bitcoin into it and you pull different Bitcoin out. It's online, obviously, but this is a way of hiding where it's going and just totally launders the money in seconds.
I personally haven't had this happen to me yet. I don't know if you guys have had any issues with this, but not to this extent, obviously. But the thought of it could easily happen. It's pretty terrifying.
I haven't had, something specifically with Bitcoin. I've had my identity stolen years and years ago, and that was a whole process of dealing with that. Obviously, this is far more intense and far more extreme, but it's not a great feeling.
No, definitely happens. I don't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but you hear it all the time how common it is. And this person definitely had a terrifying one. So lives in a cool sounding place.
Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say it's very common, but a thing that's very interesting about it is a lot of people feel like they are ashamed that they get their identity stolen. And that's like the number one thing that hackers rely on is that you are too ashamed to tell people or to tell authorities. It's absolutely the wrong thing to do. You must tell people. You must let them know. But it's a big deal with people getting their identity stolen, to be just like afraid or sad or just they, go in on themselves feeling that they made a mistake. It's not their fault. It's the person who's doing it that's the terrible person. And anyway, I just was trying to say that because it comes up so often. People get their identity stolen, like you said, all the time. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Luke. That's very reassuring. Those of you listening out there, Luke feels for you. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. Just learn from your mistakes, and yeah, I'm gonna cue up the music. Are you ready, Jack?
I'm ready. Okay, so this story comes from the internet. Someone named Zobafin. That's what they go by, anyways. And the title of the story is, I grew up in a haunted, demonic house. It's been abandoned since we moved out. I don't often talk about it because it's scarred me. Just talking about it freaks me out, but here we go. I was about 9 years old. I'm 27 now, for reference, and my parents decided to move out to out of their small apartment complex. Rented a house in Brisbane, Australia. We couldn't afford much, so it was cheap and a very old-looking house, and nothing so bad that my dad couldn't fix it up. At least that's what he thought. Keep in mind, the owner of the property lived in another area, pretty far away, so it was hard to get into contact with him. Once we moved in, there was some strange thing that caught our attention. There was a big, gross and tacky-looking rug in the kitchen with weird brownish-red blotches. Looked like old blood stains, so we thought this has got to go. We rolled it up and chucked it out. The property had a big backyard with acreage of land. There were a lot of trees. On these trees, at least many of them, there were for some reason, horseshoes nailed to them. Horseshoes nailed on trees all over the property. One horseshoe was even nailed to the wall inside the kitchen. Again, we thought, no, this is weird and creepy. It wasn't until years later that I looked into it and found out that apparently hanging horseshoes was meant for good luck. They were supposed to get rid of negative energy, but we didn't realize this at the time, and after taking them down, we went through many years of bad luck while living in this house. At first, apart from the house looking creepy and old, there were no physical signs of anything paranormal. But as a kid, I loved playing outdoors. I would have a backyard with lots of land. This was pretty fantastic at first. Soon enough, being a kid that plays in the dirt, I started to find things under the dirt. I found clothing buried in random parts of the property. My mom would occasionally see little bits of cloth sticking out of the ground too. Being curious, we would dig them out, and it was always clothing of women or children. Sometimes even the odd shoe here or there. My parents didn't seem to care too much. My dad was a skeptic. They always had some excuse for why stuff was there. They'd tell me not to worry about it and change the subject. The house was kind of lifted off from the ground so I could go under the house and play. One day I found a bone buried up there. This is when my mom realized this was just too many coincidences and told my dad. She wanted to report it to the police, but my dad just said something like, don't waste your time, it's most likely old cattle bones. So we listened to my dad. Soon enough, the paranormal stuff started happening. My dad always worked at nights, leaving me and Mom in the house alone. In the living room, we had one computer. We had dial-up internet back then, and it was referred to as the family computer. I would usually stand behind my mom while she was using the computer, and I would just watch. While I watched, I felt a hand grab me on the shoulder from behind. I turned around thinking it was my dad, home early from work, but there was no one there. Another night, I was in my bedroom. It was the middle of the night, and I was asleep, but I was woken by the sound of a toy from my shelf. And I had a Furby, a little toy. Could sense someone was in front of it and start talking. I heard it activate, and it started rambling nonsense. If you ever had one, you know what I'm talking about. However, my bed was nowhere near the shelf. Never activated on its own before, and the rambling just kept continuing. So much I couldn't go back to sleep. So I wanted to go turn it off. I walked over to the Furby and picked it up. It had stopped. Now I checked the switch on the bottom. It was already set to off. Eventually, I started having nightmares. The same nightmare every single night. It was always so vivid and real. The dream was of me tied up with rope on an old bed with springs and no mattress. It was my bedroom, though the room was differently. No light bulbs or electricity. A single bedside table with this old-timey candle on a plate. It almost seemed like from a different time period. I would try to yank free from the ropes, kicking and trying to get out. I would wake up in a sweat, have 3 red marks on my stomach, almost like 3 scratch marks. Now, I've looked into this. Scratch marks often mean demonic possession. It was mentally exhausting. I couldn't handle being in my room anymore. I was maybe around 10 years old at this point, and I was too scared to talk about it to my parents. I didn't tell them exactly what was going on. I just kept insisting on sleeping in their room. I don't have any memory of this, but my parents have since told me when I did this, I would often sit up in the middle of the night, point at the window, and start screaming, saying things like, "Don't let him in," and "Shut the windows." Windows were already closed, but my mom would get freaked out about this. Dad would say something like, "He's just having a bad dream, go back to sleep." Over time, my mom would start hearing walking on the floorboards in the middle of the night while Dad was at work. But nobody was in the house. The ceiling fan would turn on by itself, even when the switch on the wall was off. Strange things like this would happen. Eventually, things began to wrap up, and the bad luck turned into a living nightmare. Our family started to grow. My baby brother was born, and after some time, he was starting to walk. It was a great memory, but it quickly was ruined. Shortly after learning to walk, out of nowhere, he was bedridden. He wouldn't sleep, he suddenly couldn't walk anymore, and he wouldn't eat. He had to be taken to the hospital, and the doctors weren't sure what was wrong with him. They did tests, and one doctor even suggested he was faking it. They did x-rays and couldn't find anything wrong. I think my parents weren't satisfied with that answer. How or why would a little child fake something like whatever was wrong with him? We took him to another doctor, and they found a rare cyst on his spine. They had never seen it before, only heard about it in textbooks, and it was close to bursting. Could have paralyzed him for life. After months of being in the hospital, we were finally getting back to a normal life, as normal as you can have in a house with these strange events occurring. We decided to install a chicken coop, raise some chickens. With the size of our backyard, it felt like a good use for it. However, it seems this house had other plans. We always locked up the coop before night, but we woke up one morning to see the door wide open. All the chickens were gone. We had 10 of them. We found them shortly after discovering the door was open, at least part of them. All the chickens had their heads hacked off, no bodies found, just the heads all laid out neatly in a straight line in our yard. That seemed to have been the final straw. My dad was the one to call the police. No suspects were found, and despite struggling for money, we finally moved out of that house. The nightmares have stopped. It's been over 10 years since we moved out, and the house was never rented out again. It has begun to decay, and weeds are taking over most of the property. I've dabbled in haunted house investigations over the years, but that's one place I'm never going back. I did find one update to this post. It says, "I've shared the story before, and as a result, apparently some kind of investigation was opened, revolving around the house. I was visited by police officers asking questions. They told me they'd contact me if they got anything new. The only thing I learned was that before we rented it, it had been rented out to a biker gang.
That is crazy.
Wow.
That is really crazy.
Why didn't they just hang that horseshoe back up? Man,
I don't know. I guess he said. I guess apparently he didn't learn that until after they'd already.
like they thought about it later, like we removed those horseshoes and
When they started mentioning the horseshoes, I was like, you probably shouldn't take those down. I was definitely put up for some sort of protection ward by somebody.
Captain Hindsight on South Park is what came to my mind when you said all that. Oh man, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and so there's actually a couple different, beliefs about the horseshoes. Some said to have them kind of like turned up, and some of them have turned down. Both of them involves containing luck of some kind, good luck. And if it's facing down, the good luck will pour down and act as a like a barrier. So some people say to put them up during certain times of the year, and then turn them down and put them on your front door or any entrance to your house. So there's a couple different, beliefs around positions of the horseshoes.
He was having very vivid dreams.
Yes.
It was kind of like almost the start of things. And it seemed to obviously it escalated, I think, to the point of where what happened with his younger sibling, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And, the dreams, he describes them very, very particularly. And it definitely seems like, if there was some kind of like negative energy involved with the house, it was definitely, seeping over into his dreams for sure.
Kind of hear that. That happens a lot of times with people. But I think that, like I just said, the real thing, crazy thing was really, I don't remember how old his younger sibling was, but it sounds like developmentally he just completely stopped and actually, like, he couldn't walk anymore. That's just, terrifying.
Yeah, so it seems like, because he mentions that he had left the house over 10 years ago, so it seems like they were there for many years. I would say probably like 5 years or so. So yeah, it's hard to say how old his younger brother was.
Yeah, that was crazy. As soon as we were talking about the clothes, too, I was just like, man, why didn't you call the cops then? It sounds like something bad would happen there, and you want to make sure that they know that you're not involved with this.
Yeah, definitely he wanted to know what was going on. He wanted to know more. He's kind of like, even at, I don't remember his age then, but he was investigating, right? He's like digging under his house.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume for a reason. So obviously had an inkling and I want to say a knack for this because it was kind of forced upon him, but it seems like he was completely aware and trying to get to the bottom of it a little bit, even though later, more came to him, obviously.
Yeah, it definitely seemed that way. He also, started doing, like you mentioned there at the end, that he started doing like haunted house investigations. So I imagine he's probably pretty, almost obsessed to some degree with the whole thing after having personal experiences like that.
You'd have to be, and to do something like that is just...
Evidently, fear is not a factor for you.
Fear is never a factor, Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I mean, to be like, have all that crazy stuff happen to you and then still pursue it. He may have been still afraid, but he wanted answers nevertheless.
Oh yeah,
Definitely. That's crazy.
Look, so I found this bone down there. What it was. A lot to take away from that. If you move in and there's a bunch of good luck stuff hanging up on the wall, if there's a bunch of stuff hanging up on the wall, maybe you should research what that means. Kelly even threw in the dial-up internet.
Yeah.
It's a very important part of the story.
Very nostalgic, too, though.
Very nostalgic, yeah. Like, give you that feeling, set the mood.
I definitely had that, like, we had that like family computer thing where everyone gathered around it. Well, even if you weren't using it, you were all kind of like in the same room together.
Yeah, for sure. That was a good story. It's a good story. I like that one. Who do we have next? We got Luke. You're up next for another story. Let me set the scene for you, man.
All righty. This is the second story by the user that wrote the other jailhouse one. I didn't mention his name. It's the Coyote Kid on Reddit. All right. So this is at the county jail again. One night, it was around 3:30 a.m. to 4 a.m. I was called to come to a cell block to relieve the officer for a short time. He had a phone call in the office or something. When I got to the cell block, he says thanks, and he should be back before it's time to do a check, and leaves. So all the cells in this unit faced the desk and a small window so the inmates could look out. I sit at the desk and twiddle my thumbs for a few minutes when I heard a tapping sound coming from one of the cells. I looked around to see where the tapping was coming from, and I hear it again, and then I hear a voice say, 17 house. I look over at cell 17 in the corner. I see an inmate standing in the window, tapping on his wrist, asking what time it is. I held up the number of fingers, and he nodded before stepping back into the dark. A few more minutes went by, and the officer still had not come back. I looked at his log, and I realized he was due for a check. I stood up and began going around the cell block, looking through the cell door windows to make sure all the inmates were safe and nothing was out of the ordinary. When I got to the cell 17, the one with the inmate who asked me for the time, I shined my light into the cell, and it was empty. Like, completely empty. No inmate, no bedding, no personal effects, nothing. I double-checked that it was cell 17, and I finished my check. When I go back to the desk, I pulled up the cell log that showed which inmates were in each cell, and 17 was empty. I sat back at the desk and looked over again to make sure it was cell 17 that asked me and not 18 or 16. Cell 17 was in the corner, and I was 100% that it was that cell. When the officer got back, I told him what happened. He thought that was strange. It had been out of service for about 2 weeks due to having a broken toilet. When I left the cell block, I went to the sergeant's office to ask him to pull the video of the incident, as I know there was a camera that faced cell 17. Video showed me sitting at the desk. You could hear the tapping and the voice saying 17 house, and me holding up my fingers to show the time, but no face was in the window.
Oh, I really don't like the prisons.
Prisons are nothing to mess with. This guy is in like a hot spot. Paranormal activity at his job.
Yeah, it seems like it. He's had a couple encounters already, and I like the details in this story. The checking of the cells, just consistent between the two stories, which adds a lot of credence to, it seems like it's real. And then, talking about working the night shift, the different, the way the positioning of the cells in that particular second room when he was at that one, and how they were slightly different than the other maximum security unit. I just felt like, if this is a fake, this is a very good fake. This is someone who definitely works at the jail. But I think these are actually real, true stories. And if so, they're kind of, he muted himself. I do that just so I know that Jack might say something.
At least you click it. Jack and I just hit the damn microphone. I realize that when I'm editing. Like, Jack is always beating up his mic.
Yeah.
Anyway, it happens all the time, right? In a bunch of different scenarios. So the likelihood of it being one individual doing it to him would probably be pretty low. But who knows? It sounds like some pretty elaborate prank if that was the case.
Right. Yeah, at some point they would have probably figured that out, I would think.
So this guy probably has a bunch of more stories, I assume.
I believe he does have a couple more.
I'm curious if his coworkers are experiencing some of the same thing,
Well, yeah, they obviously saw the bald-headed man that was, not captured on camera, and
This time something was captured, though.
You're right. Yeah, they heard the voice and everything and the tapping, and he was responding. So it's very clear that he could see what he was looking at and looking in that direction. So,
yeah, that's a good story. I like that one. I just think I wouldn't want to work in that environment. Kudos to people that do it. It can't be easy. I know.
No, I wouldn't want to work that without ghosts. It just sounds like such a hard job and a stressful situation.
Yeah, high stress. Then you had throwing things like that. I can't even imagine what that would do to you. Just sounds insane. I do apologize though, because can you hear my dog barking?
I guess you can probably hear it a little bit now, but I couldn't tell if that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it is. So it kind of ruined the story for me, because like this is what the story sounded like to me.
Man, it's just dang complicated, man. It's like a dang old Rubik's Cube, man. You like talking about blue, red, man, then you get to one side, and then you like messed up the other side.
I really like that one. I'm glad that one is for me.
I even love the captions bouncing around. It worked out perfect because
It did work out.
It did ruin that half of that story for me. I was trying to get on like my security cameras and be like, "Shut up" to his dog during that story. Oh, can't live with him, can't without him. I need a cat like Luke.
Big old cat.
I'm up next, right? I think this is my last story.
Yep.
Of the night. So let me set the mood up back for me now, and we'll give it a go here. This I have titled Pizza Delivery Scary Story. And I was excited to share this after Luke shared his pizza place scary stories. Is that 2 weeks ago now? I can't even remember. But yeah, I'm excited. So Pizza Place scary story here. I recently graduated from high school and I work at a local pizza place as a delivery driver at night to make a little extra cash. Friday and Saturday nights are always the busiest because everyone's either home or with a friend ordering food. So those were usually the nights I would work. We got a delivery order late one Saturday night right before we closed at 1 a.m. Right before we closed, the call came in. It was a delivery order for a guy named Kyle. It was a small order. I think he only ordered a medium cheese pizza. He lived like 10 minutes away from the store. After the order was done, I hopped in my car and put in the GPS, and it populated the directions to his house. So eventually it led me to a short dead-end street that veered off another dead-end street. The house was the last one on this dead-end road. It sat right next to the line of trees that ran along the side and another side ran along the side of a highway. It's pretty much dead at this hour. Given how late of the hour it was, I didn't want to ring the doorbell, so I sat in my car and called this Kyle guy's number. It rang once, then went to voicemail, so I hung up. Then I got a text from him telling me to come up to the door. So I did. I got to the big wooden front porch of the house and the front door opened. A bald guy opened the door. He didn't look very old. He looked like in his 30s, yet his head was completely bald. Maybe he was sick or just thought this looked good on him, so I won't judge. However, his breath was disgusting. He seemed to be quite drunk. Something was a little off. The payment was made through a credit or debit card, so usually there is no need to wait around for money. However, this Kyle guy asked me to come in, put the pizza on the kitchen table, while he went down to the basement and got the money for the tip. Said he left his wallet down in the basement. I don't object to money, so I waited in his kitchen. The room was only lit up by a small light, so it's pretty dim in there. The house smelled disgusting. Disgusting as hell, to be honest. I don't know what the smell was. Kyle was taking an awfully long time down there in the basement, fetching this tip that he talked about. So while the guy was gone, I figured I'd start to wander around a bit. I stepped into the living room, which was adjacent to the kitchen. The TV was on, and I noticed the back door. I could see through the room that the back sliding glass door was half open. Maybe he was airing out whatever that god-awful smell was. I walked to the back door expecting to get a quick breath of fresh air, but the smell only got worse. Then finally, I stepped outside to the back deck. I heard flies. The sound of swarming flies right by the door. Well, I guess there was a motion sensing light because as soon as it saw me movement, it turned on. This revealed 2 big black trash bags stuffed with 2 long objects. The smell was unbearable too. It took me a second to catch on to what I was most likely looking at. Suddenly waiting around from the tip didn't seem like a good idea. I went back inside and rushed to the front door. And as I'm doing so, nearly there, I heard and saw Kyle emerge from the basement calling to me, waving a few singles in his hand. He saw me as I was about to reach for the doorknob to open the door, and he asked where I was going. I had to come up with something, so I said I was just rushing to check if I had left something in my car. He said, "Oh, okay." As he came over to me and handed me the bills, he then turned to the back door, sliding glass door to the porch, where the light was still on. He then looked back at me, with his gummy smile now disappearing. He asked me in a firm voice, "Did you go to the backyard?" I told him no. He just stared at me, not saying anything. I didn't care so much some more, so I opened the door and let myself out. But not without him trying to grab me by my shoulder as I got onto the first step. I yanked his hand off my shoulder and ran to my car. I saw him run back inside with the front door still open. I turned my car on and I sat and watched his front door, curious to see if he'd come back out. And he did. He came back out running full speed towards my car with a big metal rod in his hand. I sped away from the house, ready to call the police and report him as soon as I got a little bit away. I called when I got down the block, making sure to leave him no time to dispose of those potential dead bodies. I waited down the block and saw the police cars pull up literally within 2 minutes. I watched the whole thing. Come to find out, in fact, Kyle, if that's his real name, had already started moving the bags, which did contain dead bodies, He was trying to move into the bushes in his backyard. Everything about this guy was off, from leaving the back door open to reveal dead bodies to a pizza delivery boy. The man was definitely deranged, but he also wasn't the smartest man around. You think it takes some nerve to go wandering around somebody's house, though, right? Like, I've delivered pizzas back in my day in high school. I don't remember just thinking, oh, this person will be right back. I'm going to go wander around.
You don't do that specifically so you don't encounter anything like that.
I've heard people, they take a delivery and they get invited in. It's always an awkward thing. And then when you're in there, I've heard people they do wander around. They kind of like just check out the place, and well, that makes you think twice for sure. I don't know if I would go in someone's house if even if they like, oh no, come on in. I don't know. I guess I would just be like, no. Have you read online stories?
Well, back in my day, there wasn't like as many cards when I was in high school delivering pizzas, right? Like debit, credit cards. So really it was like cash based.
Yeah.
But I imagine that majority of the time it's probably cards now, but you might have that every once in a while where somebody wants to give you a few dollars cash. And you understand why like he waits around for it. To me, it's weird that the guy's got to go to the basement to get the money, but he said he left his wallet down there, so I guess that's one thing. But when you start piecing things together, like I smelled this freaking god-awful smell of something. You got to wonder, like, how long would you stick it out before you...
At some point, you got to decide, this isn't worth it. I don't know what the tip's going to be, but I don't need it.
It's not going to be enough, right? I mean, golly.
It's like a medium pizza. Is that what it said it was? So, yeah, at most it's going to be a couple bucks.
Someone said, what if they lured you in by saying, come look at these cool retro video games, Jack?
Dang it. Maybe. Okay, yeah, I would probably do it.
Man, I don't know. So for me, just because I've done a lot of delivering back in the day, there were a couple weird... People do have you come in. That is a real thing. And set something like on the counter or something. Yeah, like I've done that. But what about that moment when he like comes back up and they had this awkward exchange and he's like, just flat out ask him if he went to the backyard? He's so creepy. Like, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would probably do is guess what they did was trying to play it cool and be like, no, I didn't do that. And then
what backyard?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Like there was motion though, right? So like obviously motion light was on. He knew.
Yeah, I would say like I heard some raccoons back there or something like that. Around our parts, raccoons would definitely be a thing. You would go in backyards and stuff.
He'd say, "How do you know it was a raccoon?"
Yeah, right. At this point, this guy kind of knows, right? I think I would. I gotta get out of here.
You didn't have to make fun of the guy for being bald, though.
Can't escape it today.
That in the story. Very relevant. Another very relevant one. Likelihood of this being true, Luke. The end is what gets me, like, because he could confirm that there were dead bodies somehow, but he didn't say like this guy's name was or whatever, or maybe not even that, but just say like this guy did end up going to jail. But then again, would you out of fear kind of leave it at that, or
if I thought I was like in that situation, I would probably check up on it and make sure whether or not this guy got arrested. Like if he came out and I started like, presumably trying to attack me with some kind of metal rod, I would want to know, did he get arrested? And if he did, I would be all over that story. I would be like, what happened? Specifically, what happened? Because I would need to know.
So that guy like kind of like chased him out the front door, like the porch. Then he went back inside. Like I find it really interesting that he just sat there and waited to see if the guy would come back.
Yeah, I don't know, but maybe if I'm trying to think of getting in that headspace, maybe they were almost hoping something would happen so that they could call the police. Like before that, it's just like it smelled weird. He may have grabbed me on the way out. I can't tell. If he comes back out, I'm calling the cops,
If someone comes at you with a metal pipe or something, then you have grounds to call the cops. And yeah, that makes sense, actually.
I assume this all happened pretty quick, too. Probably wasn't like, I just sat there for minutes and waited. I'm sure like the guy ran in and grabbed it pretty quickly and got back out the door. Well, Luke, you have the last story tonight. Then we'll go into our vote for the scariest story of the night. Then Jack will share personal experience. So, Luke, I'll cue you up and let you get to your last story here.
I was a sergeant in the U.S. Army and getting out from the military when President Bush ordered more troops into Iraq in 2003. I had just returned home to Austin, Texas when I was summoned into my local National Guard unit. It told I was being recalled to the Army, but the unit was already tasked out to deploy to Iraq was already out. I was not part of the unit yet, so the commander offered me a waiver to deploy with a government contractor, Halliburton. I knew that I would make more money as a contractor, so I took the offer. Not long after arriving at Kuwait, Camp Doha, I began working with the operations team overseeing logistics affairs. We would oversee the daily convoy of supplies between Kuwait and Baghdad, a route riddled with IED incidents, small arms skirmishes, and almost constant breakdowns of Army and civilian vehicles. Because I was a saw gunner in the 1st Infantry Division while in active duty, and was technically still in the Guard, I was often in the convoys manning a mounted weapon that accompanied the mostly civilian convoys. During these runs, we had a few strange encounters in areas south of Baghdad, known then as Camp Babylon, occupied by French troops, but then designated an archaeological site for obvious reasons. Camp Babylon was set up in an area that was said to originally be inhabited by the famous Tower of Babel. Indeed, there are ruins here that did look like a massive structure once stood at that spot. I had 2 strange incidents happen to me while passing through there. The first incident seems a bit benign, but sets the mood for the second. We were passing through Camp Babylon in the afternoon one day when our convoy took small arms fire. The standard operating procedure at the time was to stop the convoy and return fire. This was because in the past, such incidents ended up being a lone gunman attempting to scare the convoy into running into IEDs on the road. Because of this, our orders changed to stop the convoy, dismount, return fire. While engineers looked for explosive devices on the road, we scanned the horizon for enemies. Nothing. They most likely fled immediately. However, the ruins around Camp Babylon were alive with shadow figures. They seemed to move about the area. Several times we would spot the figures, but they would immediately disappear. The contractor, lying beside me with his weapon, commented, "How odd that we are in the shadow of Babel, fighting the supernatural." I didn't respond, but knew he was a Mason, high up one at that, who was really into the arcane aspects of Babylon. I didn't feel at the time that much was supernatural, but suddenly these shadowy and bizarrely small figures did seem so, and they darted about the structure. Once the road was deemed clear, we continued on to Baghdad. The second incident occurred about a month later. At this point, the weather in southern Iraq and Kuwait had turned quite cold at night. During this encounter, we had just completed the fly run to Baghdad and were returning back to Camp Doha and Kuwait when a vehicle in our convoy broke down. Once again, we found ourselves right at Camp Babylon. While the Army mechanics took a look at the vehicle and the rest of us took up fighting positions around the area, strange things began to occur. It started with a strange light bobbing in the desert. Thinking it was a person with a flashlight, we used night vision goggles to watch and check it out. It was simply a glowing ball of light moving toward a set of ruins. After the initial contact with the light, a few of us had moved forward away from the convoy to see what the source was. After seeing it was self-contained and not a person, we were a bit alarmed. Then we heard a sound that I will never forget. A long wailing began from one of the ruined structures, foundations not far away. It sounded like a woman in agony, mixed with loneliness. On and on the sounds went while we huddled in the cold and dark, wondering what the hell we were listening to. With our goggles equipped, we used our flashlights to spotlight the ruins. If you've ever done this, you'll know that a normal flashlight with night vision goggles looks like a massive beam of light. We scoured the area, but no source of the wails or the ball of light were seen. About this time, we were told via radio that the vehicle was repaired and ready to roll, so we decided to return to the convoy. I was slinging my saw over my shoulder when I noticed my contractor partner was staring at the ruins in horror. He was frozen. I shook him and he snapped out of his stupor, quickly leaving the area with the rest of us. Once we were back at the camp and it was pleasantly daylight the following morning, several of us were chatting about the encounter at Camp Babylon before our daily operations briefing. It was then I remembered the terrified expression on the face of the contractor, so I asked him about it. He was still obviously traumatized by the event, but managed to explain that as we were leaving our position on the sandy hill, he saw a tall, dark figure standing beside the ruins. It was watching us as we were looking for it. He said that he felt an instant wave of despair hit him, and thought he was going to die. He didn't remember leaving the area. His next memory was in the Humvee heading back to Kuwait. I now write nonfiction books about haunted places for Llewellyn Publishing, and have visited hundreds of reputedly haunted spots. But I'll never forget the wailing figure at the ruins of Babel. It's also worth noting that when I related this story to some of our Pakistani employees at Camp Doha and Camp Arfan, they were quite horrified. One of them, a translator we called Artie, said we had encountered a jinn, or a damned spirit, and we were lucky to be alive to tell the tale.
That's intense.
Yeah,
was
war is so
very
scary. Then you have that.
Yes, you have shadowy figures. You have, this jinn or whatever it was. That would be very difficult to deal with just to see.
Looking over the landscape and seeing all those shadow figures, that had to be terrifying.
Yeah, I think what makes it even worse is he described them as being very small, like almost like a childlike size, darting between the structures.
I'm sure that stuff like this happens all the time, but a lot of people just don't come forward with it in war. Seems like it would if these things are true, it would be it's definitely something that would manifest these sort of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would definitely be like a location that would attract negative energy or evil spirits. I mean, why that would be like a place to go if there's some sort of war or battle that's happening. That would be where they would end up. It's also, it makes sense that military, soldiers would dismiss these things or not tell, though we still end up finding out these stories, even going back to, stories from Vietnam and things like they would hear. There are some soldiers who had supernatural experiences as well.
Also, this is an area just filled with ancient traditions and magics and stuff that date back millennia, the very cradle of civilization with Babylon. And so there's definitely, if there's going to be a place where something old and ancient and dark exists, it would be somewhere out there. Just something that's been around for a long time, feeding on war, energy, or despair, and waiting.
Yeah, the translator said it all. I think a lot of times if you have shadow people, I don't know if people always associate that with something so dangerous, because the translator said you're lucky to be alive.
Yeah, he definitely seemed like he knew that this was something they should not have been near.
But you're just going about your normal route, doing your normal things, and that's terrifying.
We already had several stories tonight where I've got to check. I'll check all the locks. We got to get new locks from
every week. He gets new locks. This is getting expensive.
The fact that he mentions that he now writes books about hauntings and stuff like that, I need to track down his books, actually. I believe he linked it in one of the comments, so I'm wanting to check that out at some point.
What was his name again? You don't know?
He didn't give his real name in the Reddit post. I imagine it's on the book, so once I look that up, finally
unless he's like a ghostwriter. I really didn't mean to do that. Well, I think we're at the point tonight now where we'll take just a quick break. We'll play a clip, and while the clip is playing, we'll come back and try to, I guess I don't want to say debate, but we'll discuss what the scariest story in our opinion of the night was.
You saw the dog, didn't you?
What dog?
The black dog.
You mean like the Led Zeppelin song?
No, Cruz knows what I'm talking about, don't you? I've heard truckers talk about it on the yard. They say it comes when you've been on the road too long and pushing too hard. When you get greedy. They say it comes to take everything away from you.
And it did. I was, hauling a load up from Atlanta on my 6th straight Georgia run. It was my daughter's birthday, and I thought I could make it home in time. I was on this long, dark stretch of I-75 with nothing to look at but the white line when I saw it. He was in the middle of the road, coming straight at me with his teeth bared, red eyes staring. So I swerved to miss him. lost control.
Where do you come up with this shit?
It's for real, Wes.
Yeah? And I bet you've seen UFOs and aliens with big eyes.
No. Just a black dog.
From a great movie.
It is. That West guy is a prick.
He's kind of a jerk, isn't he? Where do you come up with this? The Randy Travis is a great award-worthy performance in that movie, by the way. It's quick to put him in his place, though.
He knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's real, Wes. It's the most amazing name ever, like Jack Cruz or Cruz.
Yeah.
That's the best name ever. Great movie. Anyways, though, that goes along with a scene thing, right? The black dog comes, it's terrifying, and bad things happen. So, that being said, Luke, what was in your opinion, the most scary story of the night?
I gotta say that first one you said with the roommate, and like when he came into his room in the middle of the night after he went into his other room to found that water bottle and stuff in there and the possible blood stains. That was terrifying.
You said it was wine, though.
You did say it was wine,
Jack.
So I have a tough time deciding between the prison story with the inmate in room 17, which was an empty room, and both the prison stories were pretty rough to kind of like visualize and just kind of like seeing things, and you're constant, you're absolutely certain you can see it. That's something that really affects me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to get past that first story too, because I felt like it was just so simple yet real. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I like that last story too, though. I think it was just terrifying because these guys are already in like a really bad mental space just from the effects of war. Then you're experiencing stuff like that. I guess people would say, did that cause that? Like a hallucination, or I mean, nevertheless, it wouldn't be any less terrifying. I mean, it wouldn't matter. Oddly enough, Jack, this is strange. We have people asking for a story from you from your real life experience, and which is weird, because before we went on the air here, Jack said he was going to finish the episode off tonight by talking about a story from his real life experience. So the people are asking for it, dude. I mean, you can't fight that.
Okay, so this story is actually, I don't know how familiar you are with reoccurring dreams, because you get used to them. They're the same. They're the exact same. The first time they happen, they're very jarring. They're very, it's usually, at least for me, it's usually some kind of nightmare. So some people have a reoccurring dream where it's just like a regular dream. For me, it's usually a nightmare. It started when I was really, really young. So I was playing outside with like toys or something like that. And I was on the front porch, and there would be like a gust of wind. It would get a chill. I would look up, and everyone was gone. I grew up with 10 or 12 people in the same house easily. So this was very unusual to be completely alone. Except there was one person staring at me at the edge of the front yard. He would always be wearing like a robes. Maybe like monkish robes, like kind of like drab kind of color. A rope like sash around his waist. And he had like a hood, but it was pulled back. It was very short, kind of stocky. And he would just stare directly at me. I immediately would get this feeling that I should leave. I would stand up, and I would keep my eyes on him. I'd walk into the house, close the door, look out the window, and he would still be staring. Usually I would wake up at around that point. It was, very difficult to process when I was a little kid, but, it's a dream. But then I started having to get the dream again and again. It actually got to the point that I would know I'm in a dream. And I was so used to this, I was almost expecting it. and it would never change. I would feel the gust of wind. It was usually about the gust of wind where I would realize, okay, I'm in a dream. I know what's going to happen next. I look up, everyone's gone. I see this man standing at the edge of the yard. I would keep my eyes on him, and I would walk into the house and close the door. Look out the window, almost like this will wake me up now. I will look out the window, I'll see him, the dream will end. And I had this for several years, to the point that it was, at that point, it was normal. It wouldn't affect me anymore. The only thing that changed was that I would get older in the dream. I was always the age that I was when I had it. So maybe starting at like 10 and then 11 and 12. Eventually we moved to a new house that didn't have a yard. And he would stand at the edge of the driveway. There was the gravel driveway. But I was maybe not playing with toys anymore. I was just maybe standing outside or something like that. Even though it didn't scare me, I guess I always woke up with like a chill, like a spine tingling chill. You feel it on the back of your neck. You can feel it on your arms, like goosebumps. And nothing would change, except for one day, I stare at him, and he takes one single step forward. I was terrified. In the dream, I was terrified. I recognized it was a dream, but this is something that's not supposed to happen. At this point, something was different, and it shouldn't have happened. I turn around, I take off running towards the house. I slam the door. I look out the window, and he's not there. I wasn't watching him when I was walking towards the house. I would always step away, keeping my eyes on him until I would get in. This time I turned around and ran. I don't know where he is. This became the normal dream for a while. And this one always unsettled me. I never got used to this one. A few years go by. Again, I keep having it to the point that I guess this is just my life. Now I'm going to have this dream over and over again. You always wake up after a night. It's like, okay, you feel around, you make sure you're fine. This isn't really happening. But you still can't shake that feeling for a while. And that was annoying to some degree because, couldn't get a good night's sleep whenever I would have this dream. It kind of escalated a little bit. He would take more than one step at it, or multiple steps. Eventually he wasn't running, it was just a constant walk towards me. And I could never keep track of him because I tried to run as fast as I could to get back in the house, because at the very least I could wake up. I had the dream one more time, I think maybe in my 20s. And I make it back to the house. I spin around, shut the door, and I look through the window of the door, and there he is, face almost pressed against the glass. And he's pushing through the door. I can't, I'm ramming my shoulder into it. I can't close it. And I'm thinking, is anyone, because there's no one, like I said, every time everyone just disappears. I can't get any assistance because there's no one around. And he speaks in this strange voice. You think of like a scary voice that must be deep or loud or, violent. It's calm and almost kind of quiet. And he looks at me and he says, "Why won't you let me in?" And I just give everything I can. I instinctually know something is wrong. It's always bothered me, whatever this is. And I ram into the door. It finally clicks, locks, so I flip the lock. I look up and he's gone. I have not had that dream since. But I'm convinced that if I had let him in, something terrible. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means. But I have never had that dream since then.
Because now I'm thinking of a recurring dream I'd have. Not quite that. Okay, pretty scary, but not to that level. I used to have this dream that, and sometimes a friend or two would be with me, and sometimes it's just me. I would be in this big concrete place, just concrete everywhere. And this figure, he'd never be actually chasing me. He'd be walking. And no matter how fast I ran, whenever I turned around, he would be there. And the weird part about those dreams were sometimes I would wake up, fall back asleep, and it would pick back up right where it was. And sometimes it would be a week later, it'd pick back up where it left off again. It was like one continuous loop. It was kind of like, he was kind of like Michael Myers, but not quite. It's scary even. But he was just like after me, but never really wanted to catch me. It's weird.
Yeah.
Like if he was literally able to I was never able to make ground on him, he could have caught me. It's almost like he didn't want to catch me. That's what your story reminded me of.
That was kind of how I had the kind of same feeling. It was just, I had this instinct to just get away. And I don't even know exactly why.
But it's weird because when I had these dreams, I was in almost like another world. It felt like another world in a whole different place. But yours is like this, maybe a different world, but it's the same place at your house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is weird.
Yeah, it's very, very wild. It was unsettling for the longest time. I was expecting to have the dream again, because I had it for, 15 years probably at that point.
How often were you having it? Did it depend?
At least once a week.
Did you ever have two in the same night or not?
No, every time it would end kind of pretty formulaic. As soon as I would look out the window, I would wake up. It would be basically the next day. It was like ready to be awake.
I know what you're saying, though, because I knew it was a dream when this happened to me. And I would think, I'm going to wake up from this dream. And it was so long ago, I'm trying to remember exactly, but I almost feel like I could wake myself up. Then when I couldn't, that was terrifying. So you were fully aware that this was a dream.
Yeah, certainly after you do it enough times, after you get the same dream over and over again, I feel like it's like, oh, I've been here before. I kind of know what's going to happen next. And at the same time, I still want to be awake because this is terrifying.
Did this guy in your dream look like anybody or anything you'd seen before?
No, I meant to describe his face. It was very big, like wide, like almost, I also want to say cartoonishly wide, but to the point that it would, take up the entire window. Not it wasn't like a big window. This was just like a door. So I would say maybe twice the size of my head or so. So it was just like a very big face. There was something off-putting about it. It was almost like I did mention a cartoony kind of look, because it was almost like as if someone was drawing a face that was trying to make a really ugly looking face. That was kind of the way I describe it.
Whenever you woke up, did you actually ever go check out the window in real life?
I did, but like I said, I grew up with when I was younger, it was 12 to 15 people, so there was this pretty good sense of security, I guess I could say. I had to kind of climb over other people who were asleep to go look out the front door. As I got older, there was
like the Home Alone movie.
Yeah, it was kind of like that.
It's a good question, though. I like that question.
Yeah.
Someone else asked, how deep of a pitch was the voice?
No, it was really soft. It was almost like
you said, calm.
Yeah, calm. It was soft.
How big was the person? So a lot of people were being asked for a better description of the person.
Right. So I actually do remember this person. Most of the time, I would say right at 5 foot, maybe a little bit less even, very kind of on the shorter scale. I definitely got the feeling that this person was an adult. However, when it came to the door, I was actually more shocked that they were able to be at the window, at my height.
Did he look different then than ever before? Or did he always look the same?
He always looked the same. I never got quite that good of a view of his face before that point, because he was always at the end of the driveway or at the end of the yard or something like that. But this was face to face. It was the only thing separating us was the glass. And well, yeah, like I said, it was terrifying. It was terrifying at the time. And
how did he stand?
Well, normal. I guess you would say just kind of relaxed. I guess I would say relaxed would be the best way to put it. His shoulders were down. It was almost like he was just passively watching me and staring directly at me. Obviously, I was the only one around in the dream. And then when he was walking towards me, it was very clearly you know, I can kind of like look at my eyes. That's kind of like he was just kind of looking directly at me.
Did you ever tell anybody?
I think I did. But you know, it's like most of the time with a dream, you know, it's like you tell someone a dream and it's almost never quite as interesting as it is to yourself, I guess. And also it never seemed to resolve. And so I didn't really know what to say about it other than there was a guy that was watching me. And as it sort of started to escalate over the years, I was so used to it that I felt like this was just for me. I don't know what it means, but it's just for me. And after it was completely over, I was like, I had to really go back and really analyze everything that happened. It was like, wow, this was, yeah, I don't know how to describe it other than this was just like a dream of a guy who was, I guess, trying to get into the house all along, I guess.
Someone else is asking, did you ever think about doing something different in the dream? What would happen?
Actually, I was always scared of doing something different. That was the one thing I was like, if I do something different, what is he going to do? I know that if I get in the house, I'll close the door and then I can wake up. That was always my number one priority. When things started changing, I did try something else. I did like try to, I don't know, run to a different door. There was the front door and the back door of the house. I would try to figure out like, do I need to do something different to make him go back to not walking onto the yard? You know, and you're in that moment of like in a dream space where things sometimes make sense and sometimes they don't make sense. And so you just kind of try to make a decision.
Some good questions. When did you know that the dream had started? Was there a transition from another dream? How long into the dream did it take you to realize before you were in this scenario?
When I first had the dream, I had weird nightmares before, you know, like, I don't know, running from a wheat thresher or something like that in the field. Weird stuff, terrifying. And I'm like, oh, it never happened again. It was just like, oh, that was a weird dream. That was kind of scary. I'm glad it's not real. You know, like I said, I was like maybe 9 or 10 when it first started. And when it started happening more than once, I would wake up and go, oh, that's the exact same dream. And then it happened a couple more times. And then it was at some point, maybe, I don't know, 6th, 7th time, that's when I started to like acknowledge it in the dream.
Haven't had any more questions pop up. Luke, what do you think?
This is definitely the first time I've heard this dream. This is very odd because normally, you know, Jack would tell me stuff like this. But then again, I kept the ghost from him. So
yeah, I've had the turn of events.
Yeah, I've had recurring dreams before. You guys both described a similar kind of thing, like a person coming at you or something like that. Mine were never like that, but I did have a recurring nightmare of this creature that would always kill someone in my family. And I would wake up realizing I failed again to stop it from happening. And after a while, I kind of got a sense that I could control the dream, so I would try to stop it the next time. Always failed every time. It was probably about 7 or 8 years I would have the same type of dream, the same creature. I actually needed to maybe use like something like some sort of AI art assistant or something to draw it at some point, because I could tell you I could break it down after thinking about it for a few minutes, but it was always something horrible, something I'd never seen before in any movie or, you know, and it was the same thing. But yeah, this, to me, that seems a little more silly than like Jack's and yours did, because something about those two dreams seems unsettling, like something else that shouldn't be here was there.
Looking back at it, you're always like, what would have happened if I would have approached this being or whatever it was? In my case, it was a man that had the mask, and I never really know I can't even describe what the person looked like, if that makes sense. It's like he was always just far enough away, but never close, but always never not far away. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, but so you've looked into this some more.
Yeah, I have. Well, yeah, I have. And I'm like, oh, this face, this is almost exactly like that character from the dream. And I guess so. I'm trying to think of when this was that I had last had the dream. Maybe it was my 20s, so like 7 or 8 years ago, probably was when the last time I had this dream. So
it's so crazy that he would go to your different houses too.
Yes, everything was like I was suddenly. So we had like 3 different places we lived at, maybe 3 or 4, and I was always in wherever I was currently.
Been another interesting recording, been another cool episode here that we've laid out. Yeah, I don't know. Makes you think about your dreams. How much do they really mean? Like a lot of people are really into like what your dreams mean, and I never really have been. But thinking about this, it's like you have to dream something for a reason, right? Like it's obviously you're always dreaming when you're and go into like any sleep cycle at all. You just don't remember it, but it makes you wonder like how you generate these thoughts about these dreams that you do remember. Some of them are happy, some of them are sad, some of them are scary, but it makes you wonder like what elevates your brain to like generate that.
Yeah, definitely the question of like, why did I dream? Sometimes even just asking that sometimes gets me a little bit like, I don't know, I don't have the answer for that, and so it kind of creeps me out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a creepy thing. I need like a pick me up. I'm gonna have to play the black dog here one more time.
You saw the dog, didn't you? The black dog. I've heard truckers talk about it on the yard. They say it comes to take everything away from you.
And it did.
I don't know why that killed me. That short version. I actually saw a black dog type thing one time. No, this was years and years ago. We were out late moving some restaurant equipment. We were out very late. It was around 4 or 5 in the morning at this point.
I think at that point it's just very early.
Yeah. I was sitting in the back of a truck. We had been driving down the highway for a while, and I look out, and by back of the truck, I mean like pickup bed, and I was back there with some of the equipment, and I look off to the side, and it's not a dog, but I see a shadow person running alongside the car, and we take a turn, it's gone. Yeah, that was a really... you could probably chalk it up to the fact that I was running out of fumes, and I actually had to get up for work in like 3 hours. So when we got back home, I almost slept like a couple hours after that. But yeah, I was pretty burnt out, and we had moved this equipment all night long, and I see this thing running beside the truck.
I was actually in the truck with you. I remember you tapped my shoulder and said, "Look at this." And that's right when we made that turn. And I don't know, I saw some shadow. I couldn't quite make it out, but I was like, we had to go. I don't know what's going on, but I don't want to be outside right now. My reaction to scary stories is horrible.
Oh, we've been recording way too long. I'm getting really slap happy at this point in time myself. Yeah, I'm about to make light of their black dog, Luke, or your black band. That it was a creature. I don't know what you said it was, but shadow person. That's terrifying, though.
Actually, kind of like that guy described in that war one. It was like a very small figure of a shadow creature thing.
I think, guys, that puts a wrap on this episode of Your Scary Stories. Of course, joining us live, thank you very much. New clips up on the YouTube, at my YouTube page, Podcast Father Jeff Townsend, has all the Jeff Townsend media stuff up there. We're just going with that for now. I already have a little bit of a following. Interesting story real quick, and we'll leave on this note. So I was with GoDaddy customer support the other day. A whole mess I had to get help fixing, but the person on there said, by the way, I really want to check out this show. So I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, here in a few days, check for my YouTube page. Like, watch your YouTube, and I sent it to him. So, yeah, everybody's loving the scary stories. I certainly am myself, and I hope people get involved, engage with us. The live experience is obviously awesome. Send your scary stories over. We'll share them and going along for this ride with us. What do you guys think?
Oh, it's always fun. It's the funnest thing of the week, really.
Yeah, I always look forward to it. And yeah, definitely. If anybody's got a story of any kind, it doesn't have to be long or it can be long or short. I'd love to read it for sure.
Well, go to yourscarystories.com to learn more, and I'm going to go ahead and segue us out of this. Until next time, keep being you and keep being great.
Jeff Townsend Media. CG, good night.
And the question is, do I stay here? Will you be back? Are you gonna come back? Will you be back? Are you coming back?